you a creator constantly jumping from one project to the next, skipping steps and still feeling like you're not quite hitting your full potential? You might just be a time bender. In this video, I'll dive into the powerful yet misunderstood energy of the time bender archetype, how they move fast, skip steps, multitask, and still find mastery in the process. If you've ever been judged for not following the traditional path to success, this is for you. Let's unravel how you can harness your unique energy to unlock creative flow, find your most efficient route, and step into your full potential as a time bender. If you don't know your human design type, you can pause the video and run your free chart using the link in the description. You'll have to know your exact birth date and birth time and birthplace in order to run an accurate chart. So today, as we explore the parts of your story that make you the main character that you're here playing out in this lifetime, in this story, the you that is creating your reality, we're going to be exploring it through the lens of the not self, or what you might think of sometimes as the shadow aspect of the character you're here playing. Your not self or the shadow aspect are the things that we would mark or note as flaws. We're going to be looking at those things that sometimes don't allow us to maximize the light that we are, that we don't allow the light to fully come through these shadow elements of the main character in our story. I'm going to share with you over the next few slides some information about the energy type, the emotional theme of the type, how your type creates, the shadow elements of your type, and the highest potential of your type. In today's video, we're specifically going to be focusing on the time bender or the manifesting generator in traditional human design. As you're listening to the information about your energy type, I want you to pay attention to where perhaps you might sometimes be living out the shadow element or the shadow aspects, not in a way to judge yourself or beat yourself up, because we all live out these shadow elements at times, no matter what. We go through cycles when we're under stress and when we're growing and when things are disruptive or disrupted in our lives. Everyone experiences the shadow side. And the exploration here for you is not about learning to be upset with yourself or judge yourself or criticize yourself if you find yourself living out the shadow side, but it's to invite you to explore and have the intention here to look at if you are in a chronic state of living in that shadow place. Are there lessons for you here in the shadow place? Is there something in your soul and your life curriculum that you really need to explore in order for you to take back control over this part of your story, to support yourself in bringing out more light and bringing through more light? You can't write your story or rewrite your story if you don't first have awareness. You have to know where you're at in your story in order for you to take back control. We're going to start with exploring the not self so that you can begin to look at where you are now and potentially what are some things that you're going to do in your story to begin to work with these parts and choose to bring out the higher aspect of the main character of your story. So as you're listening, if you want to write down any of the shadow elements that stand out to you or any of the highest potential elements, you can write those down as well. Even if you're living in the shadow or you're somewhere in between, it's okay to be exactly where you're at and just to have this awareness. You are doing the light work and you do have the ability to take back control over your story at any point in time. So when we look at the storytelling layers in the chart, we first see that the layer that is the main first layer is your main character. And that main character is represented by your human design energy type and also by the lines in your profile, which is going to tell you a little bit more about the purpose of your character, what they're here to fulfill, and things that your character needs in order to feel grounded and stable and settled. But we'll dive into each of the profiles in other videos, so be sure that you're subscribed to the channel to not miss those. So here we are with the 5 quantum human design types. On the left-hand side, you'll see the quantum name, and then in parentheses, you'll see the traditional human design name. So we've had the initiator, the orchestrator, the alchemist. Today, we're talking specifically about the time bender, and then we have the calibrator. Your type tells us a lot about your unique way of interacting with the quantum field, how your creative muse, how divine source communicates with you and through you. Your type tells you a lot about the ultimate purpose of the main character in your story that you are here on the earth playing. So, as I said, today we'll be focusing solely on the time bender or the manifesting generator in traditional human design. And if you want to learn about the other types, you can just click on the types playlist in the description of this video. Your type is your unique way of interacting with the quantum field, as I said, or another way of saying this is how your creative source communicates with you or through you. And each of the energy types has a purpose, they have an emotional theme, and a potential challenge, just like any character does in a good movie. And each of these 5 energy types have a unique role, this unique way of making decisions that's best for them, and a unique way of using their energy and sustaining the energy in their lives. So typically when people first encounter human design, they relate to the story of their traditional human design type. Oftentimes it starts to help them make sense of how they have felt inside of themselves, why they have been met with some of the struggles or challenges and obstacles that they've faced and experienced. It illuminates where perhaps they have not lived aligned with their natural energy blueprint. And when they have been living out of alignment with their energy type, they experience pain or burnout or confusion or struggle, or they feel like they're not fulfilling their potential. So each of the emotional themes are different for each of the 5 energy types. And each type also has a very specific strategy in how they're best meant to make decisions. The purpose of that strategy is to help them to get back into their body, to help people remember what it feels like to trust their own unique internal decision-making process. The strategy for each type is about taking you out of the painful, not self-conditioned expression of your type and bringing you back to baseline. And this is a process that often takes time because we have to remember how our body feels in response to what feels good, right, and true. We have to remember how to trust our gut, trust our heart, to sometimes bypass the voices in our head, the thinking mind, and bring ourselves back to a natural truth that is aligned not just with mind, but with body and spirit as well. So as we go through our exploration of the time bender or the manifesting generator today, I want you to pay attention to the purpose of this type, the emotional theme, and the places where you may be challenged to fulfill the purpose of your type. But you can also think about the times in your life when you have made decisions that were good, that were right, that felt good to you, and that were aligned. Connect with that space and place in your body and really feel what your body's response to truth and alignment feels like. If you practice following strategy for your type, you will eventually, over time, bring yourself back to baseline. And eventually, as you sit at this baseline place, you will learn to know the difference between truth, and that's truth with a capital T, what's true for you, how that feels. And this varies for different people, it varies from person to person, because it depends on how much inner work you've done, what level of awareness you have, depending on your own lived experiences and where you are in your own journey of your personal growth and evolution. What is your truth? What is your path? And what are the decisions to make that is right, that feels right and good and correct for you? When you remember to live from that place and you are deeply aligned with your baseline character's identity, then that true story of the character you came here to play, you will be able to move from that baseline place, from this average baseline, to the journey of exploring what else is possible. You begin to ask yourself, how can I now take the story of who this character is and grow it, evolve it, and push it past the average baseline expression and evolve it into an even higher expression of purpose, a higher expression of the story. The timebender energy types represent approximately 33% of the population. They have the same theme of growing towards mastery as the pure generator or the alchemist type. But the timebender is a hybrid energy type. The timebender is part of the generator or alchemist type and the initiator manifester type. So it not only has the same stair-step learning curve and theme of mastery that is consistent with the alchemist energy types, but in conjunction with that, they have that same internal nonverbal creative flow that we learned about with the initiator type's energy. The time bender has the job of not only becoming masterful, but also finding the fastest, most effective, and efficient way to do something. This process of exploring efficiency and finding the fastest way of doing something isn't always mistake proof, though. It isn't always natural. It's a process that often involves exploration, experimentation, and sometimes even what we'd call trial and error. When we look at the stair-step learning curve of the manifesting generator or the time bender, we see that they skip steps. They leap over steps in that stair-step learning curve. And sometimes those steps are important steps to skip because maybe they weren't actually necessary to complete in the first place. But sometimes those steps are steps that actually needed to be complete. They were important. And then the manifesting generator will, or time bender will find that they have to go back and complete some of those steps that they skipped. So oftentimes what will happen for the time bender is in this process of skipping steps and moving so quickly and leaping over what might be vital details, they receive judgment. People judge them and tell them, slow down, you focus on one thing. But the skipping steps has nothing to do with speed. In fact, oftentimes time benders will spend a lot of time trying not to skip steps, to focus on the details. But no matter how much effort they put into trying to follow the steps, they will inevitably still skip steps because that's what they're here to do. It's just part of their energy. They're here to explore what's the fastest, most effective way that this can be done. A time bender has a lot of energy. And so what will also happen in conjunction with this step skipping is that they will be leaping up several stair-step learning curves at a time. So many time benders multitask. They're working 3, 4, or 5 different projects at the same time, jumping from one to the next. That's also an essential and important part of the time bender creative process. They need to be doing a lot of things to burn off all of that extra energy. If they don't burn off that extra energy, then they can become frustrated or feel like they're not filling their potential. What often happens is they're working on several projects at the same time. Not all of them will be successful because some of the purpose of those projects is literally just to burn off energy. And some of the purpose of those projects is to learn whatever it is that you need to learn from that particular project. And then they'll be done with it. But because you also have in conjunction with the multitasking and not everything is working out, we have this step skipping. People judge the time bender and tell them, well, if you just stuck with one thing, if you just focused on one thing instead of doing all these other things, you wouldn't skip steps. And that's just not true. The time bender will skip steps and will be doing many things simultaneously. That is how they're wired. That's how they're designed. And many of them will bear fruit, and many of them will be more effective and more powerful because they figured out that these are the things that are actually essential to the creation process. And some of the things that they do won't work out. And that has nothing to do with being unfocused and nothing to do with being careless. When the time bender can internalize that and understand that about themselves, I'm not careless. I'm here to find the most effective route. I need to do a lot of things to keep my energy moving and flowing and not fry my circuits. And that is okay for me to skip those steps and to do many things at once and to not always complete everything, but to know that things that are mine to complete will be the things that I find the most effective way to do. And when they can internalize that and understand that is when they become this powerful creative force. And as I said, in conjunction with that stair-step learning curve, the time bender also has that initiator quality, that they have that internal nonverbal creative flow. The time bender responds because they are a generator type. When they see something and they're at a reality to respond to as part of that healing strategy that moves them out of that conditioned expression to the baseline expression of the manifesting generator. So once they have something to respond to, then they have to pause because the natural inclination of the time bender is once you get something to respond to, leap into action. And to access that internal nonverbal creative flow that's very similar to the initiator process. They want to just leap into action. So when that time bender gets something to respond to, they will have a tendency to just go put that into a creation plan or creation action, to go get into their whole nonverbal creative flow. And oftentimes it'll leave people feeling confused, just like the initiator types. The people around them will be deeply impacted by their action and confused, and either try to stop them or try to slow them down or try to help. And that, of course, disrupts that creative flow and creates the emotional theme of anger, that creative disruption that is part of the initiator process. The time bender has to learn, just like with the initiator, to inform the people who will be impacted by their actions. The strategy for the time bender is a little bit different than the pure generator or the alchemist. The strategy here is to wait to respond. That's the generator alchemist strategy. But then they have to pause and look at who's going to be impacted by their action and envision what's going to happen next. And then inform the people who need to be informed. So that envisioning piece is very important. That pathway then of that speedy step skipping creative action that is so innate to the time bender can be cleared. There won't be disruption of that creative flow, and they can then begin to take the action necessary in response to whatever showed up. The emotional theme for the time bender is anger. That anger comes from that internal nonverbal creative flow being disrupted, just like the initiators. And then the second emotional theme for the time bender is frustration. And that frustration can come from the plateaus and the feeling like nothing's working out, just like the alchemist types. The time benders can experience that perpetual starting, frustrating, plateau quitting cycle that the alchemist types can experience. And that can be very frustrating to them as well, particularly when it feels like they're skipping steps and things just are not working out for them. And then they have to go back and repeat a step. So the time bender needs to practice following strategy and learn to wait to respond, to get out of their head, drop back into their body, feel and tap into the wisdom of the sacral response that is part of their natural quality, and begin to respond and envision and form their impact field, and then take action. When they learn to give themselves permission to multitask, they give themselves permission to skip steps. And when they learn to be more gentle with themselves and discover that these steps may be essential, they will become more comfortable in that role. They'll live in that manifesting generator baseline, and then they will move into the quantum expression as the time bender. And that time bender expression means that you no longer have to wait for things to show up in your external reality to respond to, because you know the difference between that frenetic, conditioned voice in your head versus divine source, that internal feeling of alignment with your right place, with your right purpose. When you know how to distinguish between those two voices, then the time bender can begin to respond to internal prompts and to leap into action based on that internal awareness of what feels good, right, and correct in that sacral, visceral place. You can start responding to the inspiration you get in the shower or the ideas that drop in during meditation or when you're walking. But you can't skip the experience of first learning strategy and just skip to this point in the process. So as a quick review, remember that strategy is about bringing you back into the body, reconnecting you with your innate wisdom. The strategy for the time bender is to move them out of the conditioned expression into the baseline expression, which is waiting to respond. Wait for things to show up in your external world to respond to. Then envision. Be aware of the impact field. And then inform the people who will be impacted before you leap into action. And again, the emotional themes are anger and frustration, that creative disruption and momentum, aloneness and disconnection from source. When we move from the baseline of the manifesting generator to the time bender, the quantum purpose of the time bender is to physically manifest creativity and speed up the quantum process in linear time. For the manifesting generator to move to the time bender, they begin to cultivate this internal sense of time almost being a physical thing. They begin to understand how to manipulate and move creation and activity and generation through the process of their understanding of time being a physical thing that can be manipulated and formed And in that process of really learning how to work with time to find the most effective way of doing something, to literally leapfrog, they will take quantum leaps over productivity. They begin to really show and demonstrate how this process of creativity and even the function of time can be altered and shifted. The challenge of the time bender is to surrender. It is very challenging when you have as much energy as a time bender to let go and trust that the right thing will show up, and then to trust in that process. The mantra sometimes for the time bender is just because you can doesn't mean you should. There's an enormous amount of capacity for doing in the time bender energy. And when they don't learn to let those external cues show them or reveal to them what's the next right step as part of that healing process, and they don't learn to let go and trust the process itself, they can become deeply frustrated and very frenetic in their approach to creation. When they learn to let go and trust in the process, then they learn to get back into that flow of their natural creative power. And when they learn to tap into that creative flow, then they can slowly move from that baseline frequency of manifesting generator to embodying the full potential of their energy and become the time bender. Contemplations for the time bender include, am I expressing my mastery, or am I settling for less? Is frustration keeping me from my masterful destiny? And is anger keeping me from fulfilling my destiny? Remember, you get to choose how you play with the archetype of your energy type. You get to choose. There's nothing wrong. There's no problem living in that conditioned expression. You're going to hit that conditioned expression from time to time. It's going to get inflamed anytime you have a cycle of growth. Anytime you're experiencing this cycle of disruption or you get challenged to stretch in your personal growth potential, it's so normal for those shadow expressions, the not self-conditioned expression, to get activated, to get inflamed, or to get triggered. And the key is to not beat yourself up, not criticize, and not judge yourself, but to understand and say, oh, this is an aspect of my character's personality. This is the not self phase of myself. It's being inflamed and triggered and activated right now. And that's okay. I'm in a cycle of growth. Then you can ask yourself, what story do I need to rewrite? What is this showing me? What new narrative do I need to create in the context of whatever's going on in my life right now that takes me out of that conditioned expression into baseline, and then from baseline ultimately into the highest potential, the quantum potential. We will be going through the other two energy types, so be sure you're subscribed to the channel to catch those videos. And if you want to learn more and dive deeper into quantum human design, you don't have to do your online learning alone. I have a special offer solely supporting new and current students in the School of Quantum Human Design who use my referral links when enrolling in courses. You're supporting me by using my referral link, and in turn, I will support you with additional one-on-one guidance, tutoring, mentoring, coaching, or consulting. To learn more and download my free guide, click on the Consult with Cass link in the description of this video. As always, if you found value in this video, please give it a thumbs up, share with a friend, subscribe if you haven't already, leave a comment, please share what resonated the most. And if you don't know what to say, you can always just leave the eye emoji. Sending you only love. I'll see you in the next video.